happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm, and welcome back,
Ann Northrup. Thank you, Gabe Gonzalez, for sitting in last week. I appreciate it. I just needed a little R&R. And let's figure out what we're doing with the news this week.
Well, we learned this week that Cynthia Nixon is seriously considering a run for governor of New York in the primary against Andrew Cuomo.
And in other former candidates, Roy Moore of Alabama is begging for money so he can continue to do battle with sodomites.
Quite explicit about that. In Starkville, Mississippi, we've been telling you about them. Under a threat of a lawsuit, the city has given a permit to the Pride Parade as predicted.
Amazing they saw the error of their ways. Well, Bermuda, will they see the error of their ways? They have delayed the end of marriage equality to June 1st. Things could change there.
At the Oscars, the winner of Best Foreign Language Film had a transgender theme.
Out actor David Ogden Stiers, we're still debating that, has died at 75.
Yes. A male escort has exposed 40 Catholic priests.
That's a headline?
Well, exposing is.
We're very happy to have as our guest
Yes.
For the last third of the show tonight, Jesse Green, who is the co-chief theater critic for the New York Times, who has a major piece in this last weekend's style section about gay male theater, from The Boys in the Band to Angels in America to Torch Song Trilogy. Some smart travel agent should be putting together packages for them all being revived on Broadway right now.
Many of our viewers will be lining up their tickets.
Well, make your reservations now.
So we start with our old friend. Well, we should let you know, first of all, we have a little program announcement. If you watch us on Free Speech TV, starting next week, March 12th, our premiere episode will be on Fridays at 8:30 p.m. and the repeats will be on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. as they do their fundraising until the 2nd of April.
And those are all Eastern times.
Yes.
Check your local listings. But let's plunge into politics. And here in New York, we're excited at the prospect of Cynthia Nixon running for governor, challenging incumbent Andrew Cuomo in the primary, perhaps.
I mean, she's already been the First Lady of New York when she played Eleanor Roosevelt in a movie. She was good. She was a good Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah, well, let's talk contemporary governor, not...
Cynthia Nixon, who you've seen on the show, and of course you know her from Sex and the City and so many things, and the Broadway stage, is a very serious political activist.
Absolutely.
And issue activist. She certainly was very, very helpful in New York in getting a same-sex marriage, which is the bill that the governor, Andrew Cuomo, who she's looking to run against, was the governor who got it through as well. But her big issue is public education.
Yes.
And this is a state where, we're falling behind in many respects on education, and her wife is also works in the field of education, and they together have been working on this for a long time and are unhappy with the way things are going.
Many years. She has children. She's been working on school issues for a very long time and has been very vocal, very activist on it, and is now picking up the other issues too, is traveling the state to listen and learn and meet people. And I think is a very credible candidate. She has not made a formal announcement yet, but the rumors are now flying that she will. I was a little skeptical that she would actually jump in, but it looks like she may.
I mean, she is being advised by people who are close to Mayor de Blasio, and we know that Mayor de Blasio does not have a good relationship with Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, Governor Andrew Cuomo is a bit of a centrist Democrat in many respects.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he helped out on, he does as much as he can on LGBTQ issues, and for that we give him credit. But there are a lot of other issues to consider in New York.
Right. And he's been a little too tolerant of the Senate Democrats who have sided with the Republicans.
Yes, we have a Republican-controlled Senate in New York, even though the majority of the members are Democrats. You figure that out. It's ridiculous, and the governor doesn't do anything about it.
Right. So welcome to the race, Cynthia Nixon, should you formally announce. And, of course, welcome back to Gay USA anytime you want to come talk to us.
Please, come in.
Yeah. Should we turn to national politics?
Well, yeah, I mean, we might as well get Roy Moore out of the way. Everybody knows how this accused child molester lost the Senate race, U.S. Senate race in Alabama. So now he's written to his supporters saying he's struggling to make ends meet. And he's begging them for $100,000 to cover his legal bills. One of his accusers, who was seeking a judgment, an apology, and legal costs, not damages.
One of the women he sexually harassed.
What is this? She wants also to ban him from further defaming her. But he wrote to his supporters, gays, he always gives us all credit. He mentions everybody. Gays, lesbians, and transgenders have joined forces with those who believe in abortion, sodomy, and the destruction of all we hold dear. And unless we stand together, we will lose our country. I agree with that last part.
Well, I think that's some marker of progress that Roy Moore is using the full lesbians, gays, and transgenders.
His wife does the same thing.
Unbelievable. All right, on the national scene, Trump's Department of Housing and Urban Development, while you were paying attention to their furniture buying habits, has removed non-discrimination promises for sexual orientation and gender identity from their mission statement. Now, they had been hinting that they were going to do this, and the Department of Justice is also heading in this direction, and People for the American Way is suing both of them to get them to release their full plans.
As is the group Right Wing Watch.
They had filed FOIA requests with these agencies.
Freedom of information.
To get the full story on their plans, and both departments ignored the FOIA request. So now the People for the American Way and
Right Wing Watch
are going into court to try to get these revealed.
They're ignoring the judgment against who's the communications woman who just got in trouble this week.
Hope Hicks?
No.
Said, Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah, Kellyanne Conway was judged to have been doing something inappropriate as a White House employee, political, and the White House is just ignoring that.
Yeah.
In fact, defending her, even though she's guilty.
And as every commentator in the world says that the tariff threats are going nowhere, just like the ban on transgender people in the military. In fact, the Human Rights Campaign is buying print and TV time for ads to promote allowing trans people to serve in the military, because the Trump administration has not forgotten that and is still pursuing policies to prevent trans people from serving.
Now, last week we told you how our State Department no longer wants to gather information on human rights abuses around the world, because then it means that maybe we have to let people in from those countries who are seeking asylum. So 150 organizations are protesting to Rex Tillerson, who would not be our Secretary of State if the Russians hadn't put the kibosh on Mitt Romney.
That's a shocker.
So
wouldn't you think that would make them all subject to treason?
Yes.
Charges.
Well, the first thing we heard when he picked Rex Tillerson was he's been honored by Putin.
Yeah.
So Putin is happy.
And I'm mad at the National Park Service, too, because they rejected the mall permit for the students' March 24th march in favor of some talent show by a local educational institution.
Well, they had the permit first. But they could have offered to say, "Hey, this is bigger than all of us. Let's share."
I think people will go around them.
Now, you read that the president's chief economic advisor,
But I just want to say, this is a traditional move by the National Park Service under all administrations to avoid having to deal with people they don't like, control these permits.
In New York, we can't get the Great Lawn for anything anymore for demonstrations.
No, the cops don't let us.
No, it's the Central Park Conservancy.
Yeah,
it's an
them
outrage.
too.
Gary Cohn, you read the big story about him leaving, the economic advisor. And people who work for Trump are complaining that it's hard to get a date in Washington. And it's also hard to find work after they leave.
What do you mean hard to get a date?
Like as soon as they're in Washington,
yeah.
They go to a bar, they work in the administration. As soon as somebody finds out you work for Trump, that's it.
Oh, I'm so
It's a deal
sorry
breaker.
so sorry to hear that.
Yes, well, you should think about the next time you make a deal with the devil.
What are your priorities? Take your pick. You can date or you can work for Trump.
And as I said, it's making it harder for them to find work afterwards.
Yeah, surprise.
No, it should be.
All right.
And then there's Stormy Daniels.
What about
now
her?
suing Trump?
Yeah.
What a story. I mean, seriously, but this is all we would be talking about for the first half of the show.
Oh, come
if nothing
on.
else would be going on.
And what's her name? sued Clinton. It's not the first time that presidents have had problems with women they've had sex with.
But it's not just that he had a friend pay her $130,000. He then stiffed the friend.
Well, that's Donald Trump,
a
real
story.
estate developer. He stiffed everybody.
And he continues to,
so to speak.
I mean, is it even worth talking about all the racists and homophobes that he's appointing to the federal bench?
No.
It's not even worth talking about.
We don't have time
They're
this week.
Okay.
We'll go back to that.
All right. So we're done with. We got anything else on Mr. Trump?
No. But
Thank goodness.
We have political news from around the country. Texas, Bexar County, which is San Antonio, has added a non-discrimination rules for sexual orientation and gender identity for county employees. Thank you for that. In Kansas, the new governor who replaced Sam Brownback has been asked whether he will return that policy to Kansas government employees because they had that under a previous governor. Sam Brownback took them away. And the new guy says, I don't support discrimination of any kind, but he won't give an answer on whether he'll actually write it into law.
Listen closely to the governor of Ohio. Why am I forgetting all the names today?
Kasich.
Kasich always says, I love everybody. We all have to get along. And when they press him on legislation, I don't know about, they don't do it. Also in Kansas, the Republican Party there voted to oppose all efforts to validate transgender identity and to recognize and they don't want to do this either, recognize the dignity of those who are, I'm sorry. They do recognize the dignity of those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. That's their other phrase. They recognize their dignity, you just can't have any rights.
But New York banker Chad Leet, who is a graduate of Kansas University, has given $1 million for LGBTQ students there at Kansas University. Thank you, Chad, for that.
In Georgia, Governor Nathan Deal signed the clean adoption reform bill, but the anti-LGBT bill, which would give you religious freedom to discriminate even though you get taxpayer funds in adoption services, that's making its way through. And the governor says he'll veto it unless it's passed with a veto-proof majority.
And meanwhile, there's a lot of pressure on Amazon to not locate in Atlanta over that and the Delta versus the NRA fight and Georgia withdrawing a tax benefit to Delta for their rejection of NRA benefits.
I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, 7 states have passed laws allowing anti-LGBT discrimination by foster care and adoption agencies. Some allow the refusal of needed medical care to LGBT kids in their care. I assume that has a lot to do with transgender stuff, but it might also have to do with reproductive rights.
There are a lot of fights left out there. People think nirvana has been achieved, but in fact, there's all this
You can't
kicking
watch
away.
this show and think we've reached nirvana. People complain that they're depressed at all the bad news.
Yeah, well, maybe in Starkville, Mississippi. There's a little bit of good news. Starkville, Mississippi's Board of Aldermen, including the vote of the mayor of Starkville, have reversed themselves because they have seen the light when
it's called a lawsuit.
Roberta Kaplan filed a lawsuit against their rejection of a pride parade.
They saw what that was going to cost them, and they don't have a lot of money. So they said, okay.
I must say that one of the things that really struck me that Gabe Gonzalez said on last week's show was that he knew younger people, friends of his, who, when the original Starkville story came up, said, so what, go to another city for Pride. I found that shocking that they should so not understand the point of establishing our rights everywhere.
Well, there was the Mississippi case of the guy who, they were an old couple and they had prepaid for a cremation, and when they found out that they were married, they said go somewhere else for it. They had to go 90 miles away for it. By the way, the surviving partner died, and now his nephew is still carrying on that case because it was a funeral home being so vicious.
You don't just go elsewhere. You fight for your rights in your hometown.
I will say this, and please take it in the right way. They only believe in burning faggots there when we're alive.
Whoa. Think about that for a minute.
It's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would feel remiss if I didn't mention that our viewer and friend Peter Boykin, who is running Gays for Trump in North Carolina, is now running for a state house seat. He is running as a Republican against an incumbent Democrat in North Carolina.
In Idaho, the U.S. District Court there ordered the state to allow the correction of gender markers on birth certificates. Thank you very much. Lambda Legal Defense.
And in New Hampshire, the House there has passed a gender identity and expression non-discrimination bill. Now it goes to the Senate, which is expected to be friendly to it. And the governor, who is a Republican, has announced that he's...
Governor Sununu.
He is in favor of this.
In Kentucky, a child bride bill has stalled. It's sponsored by a woman who was wed at 16 to a 29-year-old who had been abusing her since she was 14. But opponents say it interferes with parents' rights to pass a bill like this. Pollard's mother had married at 13. So in Kentucky law, if you're 16 or 17, you can marry with the parents' permission. Under 16 can marry with a judge's permission. And the new bill would say 18 will be the legal age, 17 if you're within 4 years of each other.
In Washington State, the legislature has passed a ban on conversion therapy for minors. The governor is expected to sign that.
Speaking of who's running, Donna Shalala, the former HHS secretary, is looking to run for Ileana Ross-Lettinen's seat in Florida for Congress. She's 77 years old. How about giving somebody a chance who could build up some seniority?
That would be nice. How about giving an out gay person a chance to run for the seat as opposed to you who don't want to talk about it?
Should we talk about what our Parkland?
Yeah, let me do one thing first, which is Connecticut.
Yes.
Huge fight in Connecticut. We told you that Andrew McDonald, out gay judge, had been nominated by the governor, who is his good friend, to be Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. And everybody went, oh, that's great. He's a good guy. He's smart. The governor likes him. This will be great. Well, the Republicans are not happy about this. And a la Mitch McConnell and the Supreme Court nominee in the U.S. Senate, they want to block this guy.
Well, they're upset that he, as a judge, stopped the death penalty bill, which would have banned the death penalty, except if you're already on death row, we'd like to fry you.
Well, what it did was the bill passed. They ended the death penalty, but only going back to people convicted at a certain time, because they wanted to keep the ability to kill the murderers of the wife and kids of the guy from the nice
and
suburban.
that guy, I believe, has become a state senator.
He has.
A Republican.
Yes. And so when McDonald ruled that was unfair, unequal treatment to have that cutoff point, and that if you're going to eliminate the death penalty, you have to eliminate it for everybody, that got them riled up. So now there's a huge fight about whether Andrew McDonald will actually become the Chief Justice, plus which one of the things they're throwing out is, well, the governor married him to his husband. That makes them too close. Really? Come on. Governors, mayors, whatever, marry their friends all the time.
And, people get appointed to the Supreme Court who used to work in administrations.
Yeah.
All right. In Massachusetts, prison officials are refusing to transfer trans inmates to the proper facilities based on how they identify. So there's a lawsuit about that. And also Massachusetts.
Yes.
We told you about the transgender elementary school principal who came out, and it seemed to be all going very well.
Swampscott, Mass.
Not so much. She was put on a leave of absence. Parents are complaining that it has to do with her competence, not her transitioning, and it's a mess up there.
So now she's on an extended leave.
Well, she's coming back from it now. That's what I read. That she was going to come back from leave of absence.
We have a little conflict of information here. We'll figure it out. All right. Well, yes. Let's go to Florida. The Parkland students are continuing their very moving and forceful activism. It's not getting them anywhere in the Florida legislature, which is just shameful in their support of the gun industry. Did you read the New Yorker piece on the woman who's the big NRA lobbyist? Woo!
She runs things.
She runs the whole state. So the legislature is not doing much, but the Parkland kids are moving on, and they will be having the big march in Washington on March 24th. Meanwhile, they are making common cause with the survivors of the Pulse massacre a year earlier. And the Parkland students went to visit the Pulse nightclub scene and talk to survivors there, and we have a local news report on that.
But not all Stoneman Douglas students went back to school today. Some made a stop in Orlando on their way down from Tallahassee. They stopped to meet with survivors of the Pulse nightclub shooting. News 6's Nadine Yanis is live at Pulse nightclub right now and was there for that meeting. And Nadine, I would imagine it was very emotional out there today.
A lot of tears, Ginger, and it was powerful to see Parkland students hand in hand with Pulse survivors. The group from Parkland reading off the names of the 49 lives lost here, then putting up a rose signifying each one. They then read the names of the 17 lives lost at Stoneman Douglas, praying no other city has to go through this again.
We're so sorry that nothing happened. We're going to get it done.
Parents and students from Parkland stepped off a bus and right into the arms of Pulse shooting survivors and Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer.
We're here to open our arms and welcome them with some love.
Two cities now brought together through tragedy.
We share their grief and their concern. 2 years ago, the entire world reached out to us here in Orlando with thoughts and prayers. We want to pay that back as much as we can.
The group wearing shirts that say kids first, politics second, making a stop in Orlando on their way back from Tallahassee, where they spent the last week lobbying for tougher gun laws.
I'm not going to stop pushing.
Some students, like sophomore Annabelle, saying they wouldn't be here if something was done after Pulse nearly 2 years ago.
I think we can now be there for each other, in a sense. Frank Hernandez.
So together, they stood as they read the names of the 49 lives lost at Pulse.
Coach Aaron Feist.
And then read the names of the 17 lives lost at Stoneman Douglas, a Parkland City Commissioner hoping there's never a list like this again.
I hope and pray that we never have to stand anywhere and read the names of additional victims that are taken by gun violence.
And so the ceremony here at Pulse lasted about an hour. The group then went back on their bus, headed back to Parkland. But the latest shooting is resurrecting a lot of wounds for Pulse survivors. Not only that, but the Pulse gunman's widow is headed to trial starting tomorrow. We're going to hear from survivors on how they're dealing with all these emotions kicking back up. And my story tonight at 6 o'clock. Ginger.
Very moving to see them all together. And Emma Gonzalez, who we told you is a bisexual leader of the Parkland students, is also making a concert with Gays Against Guns.
We have a picture of her.
And we saw her,
there she
is, and you can see on her chest a Gays Against Guns button. So everybody's getting together. Now
yes, the shootings haven't stopped. In New Mexico, a trans woman named Zakaria Fry, 28 years old, was found dead, had been missing since mid-January, found with the body of her roommate, Eugene Ray, that's him on the left, her on the right. Police arrested a guy named Charles Spice, S-P-I-E-S-S, for murder. He may have been living with them, it's a very ugly situation. Albuquerque.
In Kansas City, a young gay man, Tayron Carson, 24 years old, went out to a club one night. No problems at the club. That's him on the left. He left the club at about 4 a.m. and suddenly this car full of 4 guys comes by and just shot him dead.
A beloved member of the community, and they don't know why this happened.
2 jobs, great guy, people saying wonderful things about him, but no idea whether he was just identified and shot as gay or what.
And I've been telling you about the Abel Cedeno case in the Bronx. This is a gay kid who defended himself with a knife, ended up causing the death of another student. There he is in the middle with his lawyers, Chris Lynn and Robert Feldman. He had a court date this week. But as he was leaving court, the brother of the guy who died tried to jump him, even though he was surrounded by police. The mother, that boy's mother keeps saying, "My son was an angel," but it's.
In Philadelphia, Charles Sargent was convicted of the murder of trans woman Diamond Williams. He killed her 5 years ago. He claimed at the time that it was self-defense. What he had done was, when he realized that she was trans, he went and got a screwdriver, came back, and repeatedly stabbed her with a screwdriver, then dismembered her. But that to him is self-defense. Well, the jury saw through that and took about 45 minutes to consider the case when they got it and convicted him.
Right. Anything else on the crime front?
I think not.
Let's go to Staten Island.
Okay.
We told you that LGBT groups were banned from the Pride Parade, and political groups. So the young Democrats got themselves up in rainbow colors and had a rainbow run along the same route as the St. Patrick's Parade that was excluding everybody.
And on the same day, we went to Queens for the annual St. Pat's for All Parade. There are the leaders of that
Brendan
effort.
Fay in the middle, and I love the way that they honor. By the way, the guy on the right is Joe Crowley, who is 4th most powerful Democrat in the country and is looking to become the Speaker of the House. But
he's a congressman from Queens.
But I love the way that they honor people as their grand marshals. An anti-nuke activist, Kathleen Sullivan, there with the hat, and Dan Barry of the New York Times, who wrote that wonderful expose on the persecution of children in Ireland. So great groups. And there is our senator. U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and of course this is her first appearance at the St. Pat's for All.
Yeah.
We think a precursor to a presidential run.
It would be nice if the St. Pat's for All parade was the stepping stone to a presidential run.
Well, Hillary was at the first one in 2000.
Oh, that's true. Update from Ohio. The court there has given custody of the young trans man, 17-year-old, to the grandparents who support his continuing on hormone therapy. The parents were against hormones and wanted to send him to conversion therapy, but they're okay with the grandparents having custody. I don't quite get that, but he's in good hands now. And in Georgia, the Moderate Cooperative Baptist Fellowship has lifted its complete ban on hiring gay people. They can't be at leadership, but they can be hired. They comprise 1,800 churches. The Southern Baptist Leadership Conference is saddened by the move.
Okay, international news?
Yes.
We're going to start in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yep.
We have a picture here of Dillian Johnson, 36. He's seeking asylum in the United Kingdom. He was shot at and injured in December, so he fled. And the thing is, he is linked to, and we have the other picture, of the Chief Justice, Ivor Archie, who apparently they had some sort of relationship that Ivor Archie denies. But he's worried about getting killed for his sexuality, and so, buggery is punishable up to 25 years in Trinidad and Tobago. By the way, Archie is not anti-gay, but he's not coming out.
A little good news from Bermuda, where they, as you may remember, repealed marriage equality and knocked it down to domestic partnerships. But they are now saying that they will delay that repeal until June 1st to allow couples who are already engaged and have marriage plans to go ahead and get married so they can then be second-class citizens. But there is some thought that maybe they will find a way. The court may rule that the repeal is unconstitutional. All is not done in Bermuda yet.
Now, Germany's center-left Social Democratic Party, which used to have power and only got about 20% of the vote, they are very key to whether Merkel's going to get her deal about governing now. And their youth end of their party is run by a guy named Kevin Kühnert. We have a picture of him there. He is openly gay, but he says, I don't want to do identity politics. He's for some good things, but when somebody says that, I'm like, how about just being in solidarity with us, because we have a lot of things to work on. But anyway, openly gay guy, and he seems to hold a lot of power here in Germany now.
Yeah, identity politics is about inclusion, diversity, respect for all. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
The European Parliament has adopted a report urging strong non-discrimination protections for sexual orientation and gender identity, protection of intersex people, and condemning conversion therapy. This is a big deal because a lot of the European countries don't do any of this, even though there are some rules about it. So the fact that the European Parliament is now mandating this for everybody is a good thing.
In Russia, the World Cup's going to be there this summer, and the officials say that rainbow flags, kissing, and holding hands are okay, despite their anti-LGBT laws. They'll suspend them, the way the Nazis suspended some of their anti-Semitic stuff.
Well, they're capable of shutting that stuff down for world approval, but don't think that it's disappearing.
Of course.
In the UK, there's a group putting together an LGBT museum.
It's called Queer Britain, and it's supposed to open in 2021.
In London, and it's going to talk about oppression and celebration. In Australia, Cher was a big hit at the Sydney Mardi Gras until she took a selfie with Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.
We're not going to show it to you. It got her into too much trouble.
The gays turned on her and said, what the hell are you doing? And she at first said, but he's a nice guy and he likes gay people. And they said, no, he doesn't. He's the one who made us have this whole referendum, and it brought out all this hatred. And then she said, oh, I'm so sorry. Now I get it. And they said, oh, that's okay, Cher. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to know all about Australia politics.
Did we do Chile yet?
No.
Well, the Oscar for A Fantastic Woman, which is a transgender theme that won the Best Foreign Language Film, boosted the chances for the trans rights bill there that has been languishing since 2013.
I should hope so.
Vega, the star, is making a big difference.
Look, when a trans woman brings attention and awards to the country, I should hope you would pay attention to that.
Well, Roy Moore would say we don't want that kind of attention. Maybe he can go to someplace else.
Gay activists in Uganda are planning another try at a Pride March, their first since 2015, because they keep being, oh my God, it's unbelievable. In Toronto, they have found a 7th victim of the serial killer. And they expect
the Silver
to find
Daddy
more.
serial killer.
Yeah, well,
he was a landscape guy, and he buried people all over the city. It's horrendous.
In Panama, all over Latin America now, they're debating marriage as a result of the Inter-American Human Rights Court declaring marriage mandatory and marriage equality mandatory in all these countries. Well, in Panama, 10,000 right-wing religious people marched against marriage.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, but it's all in the courts.
The Supreme Court is considering it, yes.
So tell us what's going on in Italy with these priests.
Oh, well, we have a picture of this guy. Basically, he wrote something about the 40, he's sick of the hypocrisy of the church, which
he's a gay escort.
He's an escort, and so he gave a list of 40 gay priests to the church in Naples, and the cardinal there sent it right to the Vatican.
Only 40 would be my reaction.
That's just him.
Yeah.
And that's just the number of priests that he's had. It's not his whole client list.
Any other international news?
No, not really.
Okay, AIDS news. Well, you may be familiar with the PBS show We'll Meet Again, Ann Curry's new production.
Oh, yeah, I watched it.
I watched a couple of episodes. One, two people from who had worked together in the civil rights movement. And what they do is they take people who've worked on these movements years ago, and they want to get together again, and they haven't seen each other for decades, and it's okay.
Yeah, it drags a little bit. I mean,
and
they drag it out.
Yeah, and there was another one with gay people that was a little lugubrious. But I got a note from a producer who said they are seeking veterans of the AIDS activist movement who would like to reunite. So
who do you want to see? Actually,
I already see everybody.
Ken wants to see Jesse Green.
Momentarily.
Yes.
I want to see the people who are dead. That's who I want to see.
Oh, that's true.
Too late. But if you fit the description here, contact We'll Meet Again at PBS. They're looking for you.
Okay.
Entertainment news.
Well, at the Independent Spirit Awards, the male lead went to Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name, for playing at least a bisexual character. And we told you about the foreign film, A Fantastic Woman. And the Robert Altman Award went to Mudbound, which was a big lesbian production.
Dee Reese, Rachel Morrison, and Dee Reese got up and gave this huge speech. But I was actually more taken by Janelle Monáe's introduction of her, which was very loving.
Good.
I like Janelle Monáe.
And then there was the Oscars, not a whole lot of gay stuff to talk about. Again, A Fantastic Woman as the best foreign language film. But James Ivory, out gay writer and director, won for adapted screenplay for Call Me By Your Name at his advanced age.
And Daniela Vega, the star of Fantastic Woman, was the first trans person or out trans person to be a presenter at the Oscars. She actually introduced one of the songs, maybe the Coco song.
And Adam Rippon, the skater, showed up in a very fancy outfit, which was a harness. And he certainly got a lot of attention with that. It
was a Moschino jacket with the harness, styled by Jeremy Scott.
And he made a wonderful appearance on Ellen.
Oh, fantastic. You've got to see this. Are we going to link to it in the note?
We are going to link to it in our note. If you're on our email list to get our preview every week, we will give you the link to the Ellen show. You can Google this and find it.
It's the gayest thing you ever saw.
Unbelievable.
And Gus Kenworthy, lest we forget, do you remember that he was the one in Sochi who rescued the dogs?
No. Oh, well, yes.
And he rescued more dogs in South Korea.
I know. And by the way, one of our viewers pointed out, we reviewed Jerry Springer, the opera, here in New York. But if you're not going to get to New York, the London production is online. And that will be one of our web extras if you sign up for our email.
A couple more things from the Oscars. First of all, I was very happy and sad to see Deborah Chasnoff in the In Memoriam.
Yes,
she was the first LGBT person to thank her same-sex partner when she won a documentary award at the Oscars
the stuff
years
she did
ago.
about kids and about kids.
It's Elementary, still the best film made about talking about gay issues in schools. So it was both sad and wonderful to see her included, because they don't include everybody.
No. On the other hand, David Rabe's new play, Good for Otto.
Wait, I'm not finished with the Oscars.
Oh, well, more Oscars.
But I thought when you said on the other hand, they had these 10 activists on stage during one of the songs. Didn't identify them. Yeah. One of them was Janet Mock. So that was good.
Put up some things on the screen.
Once you figure it out.
Anything else on the Oscars?
Yeah, the gay Coco producers, the woman thanked her wife, the man thanked his husband. That was nice.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. So we saw a play. David Rabe is a very accomplished playwright. I think he's now in his 70s. He did a thing called Good for Otto on a very promising theme about people seeking mental health services out there in Ohio or someplace like that.
Great cast. No, it's in the Berkshires. It's in Massachusetts.
Right. Fantastic cast. That's Ed Harris in the middle. But it's got his wife, Amy Madigan, F. Murray Abraham, a stellar support cast.
Rhea Perlman.
I thought it was staged rather inertly. I mean, they were sort of...
The script was kind of empty.
They were sort of removed from us. I think it picked up in the second act.
I don't know, because I left.
It was rather undramatic, and it got nice reviews when it opened out of town.
Well, Jeffrey Tambor, who we know has been forced to leave Transparent for sexual harassment charges, and who has denied those charges. Well, Dawn Stacey Ellis, who is the trans editor at The Advocate, wrote a piece detailing the times that Jeffrey Tambor groped my ass twice.
Yep.
that was quite interesting.
We did lose David Ogden Stiers this week. He was dead at 75. Of course, famous for MASH. Came out publicly in 2009, also known for his voiceover work, including, I thought he was wonderful doing the Ken Burns documentaries like the 9-part New York series.
Okay.
So.
Mike Huckabee was appointed to and had to immediately resign from the Country Music Association board because of his homophobia.
RuPaul says that trans women and bio queens are unwelcome on Drag Race. Says drag is political power lies in the dissonance of men dressing up as women.
This is a longer conversation.
It is.
I actually thought he had a point. The Voice has its first trans contestant. And Netflix is now being criticized because it's running a documentary called One of Us about Orthodox Jews who've left the community.
Yeah.
One of them is a woman who left behind her husband, who held on to their 7 kids. He did.
Yep.
And it omitted mention of the fact that she's a lesbian, which was all part of the filming, but was left on the cutting room floor. Reputedly at the request of Netflix.
We are not going to leave anything on the cutting room floor when we talk to our guest, Jesse Green.
Nope.
Welcome to Jesse Green, the co-chief theater critic at the New York Times and an old friend.
Hi, Andy. Hi,
Nice
Ann.
to see you.
Hi, Jesse.
Jesse, you wrote an article over the weekend, A Brief History of Gay Theater in 3 Acts.
And that's me on the cover, all of them.
Well, when you write an article, it's
Yes.
they're all you. But this article is subtitled On the Return of the Boys in the Band and Why It Matters More Than Ever. Why does it matter more than ever? It's coming to Broadway with an all-star cast.
Well, for one thing, in terms of theatrical history, it matters more than ever because this was a play that was kind of consigned to the ash heap of pre-liberation gay theater. And I think another look at it in a major way on Broadway with a cast of entirely out actors is an opportunity to see, is it really that, or is it something that can still speak to us today?
I must say, you in reading this, you almost convinced me. I did see the road company of the original production
And I had to sneak in
years ago.
And I had to sneak in underage to see the movie when I was about
please,
16.
you're a toddler. But I found it depressing then and very self-loathing, and as someone who was a closeted lesbian at the time, it did not help my coming out process. But talk about, I am struck by the idea of it now being played by out gay men, but it's still, even though it's been rewritten some?
They're using a version that is cut down based somewhat on the movie script and cut a little further, not changing any particular political points or anything like that, but making it more streamlined theatrically. There was some purpleness in it, and some of the stuff that I think you responded to has been trimmed out of it. But I make the point in the piece that just because it was depressing to people in the closet, and I include myself, I mean, not just depressing, but terrifying, does not mean, that is not the ultimate judgment on the play. I think it's useful to look at it now from the other side of the closet and wonder in what ways did it contribute to the revolution that has happened since then. And Stonewall was the next year, and the play was still running while Stonewall happened.
And as you say, many prominent celebrities were attending the original production and taking some message from that.
Yeah, well, the cast of the play drilled a peephole into the set so they could look out every night and see who was in the best house seats. Marlene Dietrich and Rudolf Nureyev and the mayor of the city, if you can imagine.
And Jackie Kennedy.
And Jackie Kennedy, the queen of all things. So you have to also think about what was the message that they were taking back with them to their precincts, even if the message that was coming to people like us who were, cowering in fear, might have been a little different. And when I reread the play recently in anticipation of writing this article, I was rather impressed by the way it speaks toward the revolution that was coming, and doesn't negate it in any way, but it sort of shows you the things that needed to change in order for that to happen.
It's by Mart Crowley, who's still alive. Still with us.
Yeah,
50
absolutely.
years later. And, and not a spoiler alert, but I mean, one of the lines towards the end is if we could really just learn not to hate ourselves so much, which was pretty impressive. And I also thought that the first act especially, I think it's going to be one act now, but it was lively, funny. It was like a peek into this world of gay people that a lot of people hadn't seen.
Well, the conflict is between the self-loathing characters and those who are more either self-accepting or at least resigned to the fact that this is their lives. And it engages those issues that became very live over the next decade and really got tested in the AIDS crisis that followed in terms of how much were we going to support each other and take care of each other when no one else would.
And perhaps in this day when we think we've come so far and yet we sit here every week talking about the challenges and the backward steps and the confusion, it will provide some perspective on all of that to a contemporary audience.
Also, self-loathing hasn't gone away.
Hell no.
So on that level, it's surprisingly fresh. And that's disturbing. But I think a good play ought to be disturbing, not even if you're not in the closet.
So Donna Shalala should see this play.
What?
and of course, the other thing that's being revived this year is Torch Song Trilogy as Torch Song, also trimmed down. It had a nice off-Broadway run and is headed for Broadway. Harvey Fierstein, without Harvey Fierstein in it anymore. And I can remember about this and Boys in the Band. There were gay people who would sort of complain, and they complained about Larry Kramer's Faggots, which was his novel. Mm-hmm. You're telling the gay secrets. We don't want people to know this about us. Mm-hmm. Harvey said that people would come up to him all the time. Why are you telling this? Back rooms, why are you telling this? I mean, we think it's rather mild today, but let's tell all the gay secrets.
Well, and not only are those two plays returning, but we recently had The Normal Heart on Broadway and a movie of it.
HBO. Yeah.
And several other of these, what I call canonical gay male plays, have returned or are returning. And the reason I wrote the article was to wonder why that was happening, and also where were the rest of them? Why did they seem to stop with Angels in America, which is the other big one that's coming back this season?
My thought is that some smart travel agent should be putting together a package for people from out of town and want to come see all these
So there's the white
plays.
party and then there's the Broadway party.
Yes, exactly. But why are these plays being revived now? What's your conclusion about that?
Well, I think we're in such an apparently different place as a movement, as a so-called community, that looking back at history now after 25 to 50 years, the range of plays I discussed is from 50 years old, Boys in the Band, to 25 years old, Angels in America, is quite enlightening, I found, when I reread all of these plays, but also because I think a lot of people are wondering, where are we now? What are we supposed to be doing? What is the next thing? We've achieved many goals, but then many remain to be achieved. But there's a certain amount of complacency some people feel, particularly among younger people who have no awareness of what brought us to this place. So these plays become also a kind of important historical document and perhaps a motivation to think that there's something else besides our own issues that needs attention.
Well, I mean, we hear from people all over the country and certainly all over the world who are desperately in the closet just to preserve their own safety because it's so difficult. But what role does the theater have to play in all this is, I guess, my question. I mean, the theater used to sort of be a place for risk-taking in a lot of ways, and it brought out themes that television wouldn't touch, even the movies wouldn't touch, but the theater did. But that's changing, isn't it?
Well, television will touch anything. I mean, and so will many television executives. But thank you very much.
Tip your waitress.
So the role of theater is different. What you won't necessarily find on television or in movies are second looks or third looks at these fundamental works to re-examine them in the way we re-examine Greek drama, to see how do they speak to us now. I think we're understanding that these classics are just as classic as Ibsen or Chekhov and deserve to be looked at. Also, I think there's a way in which these plays, formerly thought of as gay plays, are now being repackaged slightly as plays for everybody, in the same way that if you look at the younger generation, the distinction that many young people make between being gay and being straight is disappearing anyway. Right. And bringing these stories to those people will be very important if they could ever afford a ticket.
And you say that Tony Kushner avoided this in Angels in America by turning it into a goulash, or what he calls a lasagna, by throwing everything in there. Not just, it was Jewish themes, it was all kinds of themes that
ecology,
were race,
everything is in there.
Everything.
But I think there's a lot more in these plays than we formerly thought, or we'll see when they come to Broadway this season. When I saw The Normal Heart a couple of years ago when it was revived, I found it a very different and very moving and much more expansive experience than I remembered it from when I went there and had the living daylights scared out of me by it. It's a different experience now.
Well, when we saw it when it came out in '85 or
84.
I mean, you're sitting there, and all the people being portrayed in the play are in the audience, and it's happening while it's happening. And Larry Kramer went up to the then chief critic of the Times, Frank Rich, and said, "I have never wanted anybody to like something so much in my life."
That usually won't work, folks, but
if you see Jesse at the theater, leave him alone. Leave him alone. Let him do his job.
But you said nice things about The Normal Heart.
Oh, I think it's a classic. I think it's a canonical play, and I think among the plays that I discuss, I would argue it's the one that most literally did something that changed people at that moment in the theater. You ask what theater can do. I saw that play change people's lives in a way that at the time government action certainly wasn't doing, and even our public health institutions were unable to do, and our activist organizations were just ginning up to be able to do.
Now, it is amazing that these three major plays are being revived simultaneously on Broadway. But there are a lot of other gay-themed plays around, and I was happy that you eventually got to at least a mention of a couple of lesbian plays.
Well, I feel like I'm not the person who ought to write that article, but I would love to see the article about the way in which plays by or about lesbians developed rather differently from the way these plays about and by men did, and why that's the case, and what is that canon. I would love to see that, but I think if I wrote that article, people would be justifiably...
I would argue that with you. You write about all sorts of plays. Why not write about those plays?
Well, talk to my editor.
Okay, but Fun Home certainly was a stunning success and extremely important, and won the Tony, and that was amazing. It was amazing to those of us who identified with it.
And I do feel, in the last part of the piece that we're talking about, I discuss what's next, looking at the fact that if you're looking at gay male-oriented plays, there hasn't been, in my opinion, anything at the level of the ones I discuss since Angels in America. There have been very fine plays, that's not what I'm saying, but in terms of consequence, theatrically or socially, not as much. And the answer that I come to is that the spotlight is moving on, and I hope that it will include more plays by and about women, about other members of the LGBTQ acronym, or whatever that thing is, and plays about non-white life as well, whether gay or not. I think, and that's beginning to happen, and I think we'll see more of that. And to me, the best new work that is in the line of those other plays is Taylor Mack's 24-decade history of popular music.
I was so sorry to miss it. Is it available online or anywhere?
No, but I believe they are making a gigantic film of it. Of the whole thing.
It is 24 hours.
Yes, 24 hours. It is 24 hours.
And you said even you had to listen to some of it.
Well, I had to review it immediately, so I only got to the first day of it, which was 3 hours, and then I listened to the entire rest of it because it was being considered for prizes, and I had to know the whole thing. And it is an incredibly intersectional work, an incredibly witty work. It really isn't gay. It's what you might call queer, although being old enough, I still have trouble with that word. Despite this advertisement, shall we show this?
This is we've shown this before. This is the Boys in the Band ad. Maybe okay. Where the headline says,
don't ask me to say it.
Sissy, queer, fairy,
Well,
faggot.
It's directed by Joe Mantello. You've got Zachary Quinto and Andrew Reynolds.
Jim Parsons, Matt Bomer. The whole lineup.
Well, I think they're daring people to use these words in a negative way against these stars. I mean, it is a marketing technique, but it is also a challenge to the audience. You know, you think you know what a gay play is? Try coming at us with these words. And that way, I think it's effective. I think for people of a certain age, it remains a difficult prospect to...
I worried that it was exploitative.
I don't feel that it is, just because if you look at the names involved, including the producers, not that producers wouldn't do something exploitative if it might sell the tickets.
That's what my cynical side.
Yeah. And speaking of people who are writing today, Tarell Alvin McCraney has written Choir Boy, which had an off-Broadway run a couple of years ago, and they're bringing it to Broadway.
Yes, and it will be, shockingly, the first, if you want to call it a black gay play that has ever been on Broadway, as far as I was able to determine.
No James Baldwin that qualifies for that?
As gay? No. Not that I can think of.
Terrell, of course, the author of the story on which the movie Moonlight was based. And
Choir Boy is about a private school students, I believe it's an elite black private school, and a coming out story within that. And you know, very powerful.
You quoted in your story how some of your predecessors in your business, I'm a theater critic too, would say terribly nasty things about gay people, I think of it. But I do remember there was a play called Find Your Way Home, starring Michael Moriarty.
Yes.
Kind of an S&M relationship with a younger guy and an older guy. And Clive Barnes reviewed it and he said, you know, gays have come out of the closet, and this is explosive. And I mean, this was his review. Like, he was trying to make up for something I think he said before in a previous production.
Yeah, well, it was not only acceptable, but almost chic at that time to say terrible things about gay people in literary circles. In my piece, I mentioned that Philip Roth, of all people, dismissed Tiny Alice, which many people dismissed on dramatic grounds, but nevertheless, by Edward Albee, as ghastly pansy rhetoric. This was considered a perfectly reasonable thing to say about something.
Well, then there was John Simon, who was reviewing a play called The Octet Bridge Club, which had no gay characters that I remember, and he called it faggot nonsense. And we wanted him fired from New York Magazine. We went there and we were gay leaders who met, we want him fired. And Ed Cosner said, Cosner said no, and then when we were leaving, John Simon had been hovering at the door the entire time.
Yes, well, he was my predecessor at New York Magazine when I was the theater critic there, and he was finally let go.
But you say he was a very good writer, which a lot of people give him credit for.
Well, you have to, I think it's worth asking how much does being a good writer count? Finally, I mean, we're asking this question in the Me Too movement. You know, if a director has done great movies but has done terrible things in order to make those movies and prevented other people from doing their great work, how important is it that they made great work? And I'm not sure if his writing, you know, the wit of his writing, which I, as a child, read almost to pull off scabs in a way, like, you know, it terrified me, but at least somebody was talking about those things.
I think you can give people credit for good work without necessarily wanting to support it in some way by financing it. But we can hold more than one thought in our heads at a time, I hope.
I endorse that. And I don't endorse that.
Well, of course, we sit there as critics looking at a show, and we know something about the politics or something like that, and it certainly, you try to push it away and say, wow, you know, Kelsey Grammer, who's a right-wing nut, did a great job on that, you know, et cetera.
Well, I find myself to be less judgmental in this regard about actors than I am about writers and critics. But John Simon was a special case. There really was no one who was as outrageously awful as he was, and he